Let's take you through our top story tonight. Gig workers who've now been formally inducted under the Labour Code. When I say inducted, I mean all Labour codes that applies for employees across India, across verticals. Gig workers who were exempt or rather left out of it now come into that fold. So we put the spotlight on India's gig economy here, the invisible engine of urban India, and the uncomfortable truths flagged by the economic survey tabled in the parliament today. The economic survey that was presented by Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman reveals that nearly 40% of India's gig and platform workers earn less than 15,000 a month. Truth, painful. These are the riders who deliver our food, our groceries, our medicines. They're literally the backbone of India's app-driven convenience economy that we are so dependent on. At the same time, the survey does acknowledge that the gig sector is now booming. The number of gig workers has grown by 55% from 7.7 million in 2020-21 to 12 million in 24-25. Well, today gig workers form over 2% of India's total workforce, a figure that's projected to rise to 6.7% by 29 to 2030. In fact, potentially contributing to 2.35 lakh crore to India's GDP. The survey calls for urgent policy intervention, suggesting the setting of minimum per hour or per task earnings, which includes compensation for waiting time to ensure fair wages and reduce the cost disparity between regular and gig employment. Now, tabled in the parliament, the survey says the aim of the gig economy here, the gig economy policy, should be to reshape terms, allowing workers to exercise genuine choice instead of being forced into gigs by weak demand, skill mismatches, or lack of safety net. But the contradiction here is that while platforms talk of flexibility and opportunity, gig workers have been protesting across cities demanding better pay, humane work conditions, and an end to unrealistic delivery timelines, including the controversial 10-minute delivery promise, which the government has now asked platforms to remove. Well, as we see here, what's satisfying is that the gig workers now come into the new labour code. So this is the first step towards acknowledging their hard work, which means now social security will be extended to gig workers. The labour codes have formally recognized gig and platform workers. That now would mean all social security policies, welfare funds, benefit probability will all be extended to the gig workers. So the government has realized that these platforms have become essential in our economy's growth. So therefore, they've given them a level of protection. But the next step should come from these companies who hire gig workers as their workforce. So is India's gig economy delivering growth by underpaying labor? Let me quickly bring in KV Dhananjay, who is a senior advocate, Karnataka High Court and Supreme Court. We also have Mohammad Inayat Ali, National Vice President of Indian Federation of App-Based Transport Workers. Thanks very much, both of you, for joining us. I'll start with you, Mohammad Inayat Ali. Do you feel this is a small win? Gig workers being clarified, the government clarifies that you come under the labour code, social security is extended to you, and that you should be paid minimum wages.
Yes, ma'am. थैंक यू नबीला जी। मैं अपनी बात को हिंदी में रखना चाहता हूं ताकि हमारे वर्कर्स भी चीज को समझे
जी।
जैसे सोशल सिक्योरिटी पे मैं आता हूं तो 2020 पे हम ऐसे ही खुशी मनाए थे कि चलो भाई सोशल सिक्योरिटी 2020 में सेंट्रल गवर्नमेंट ने हमारे लिए कुछ करने के लिए सोचे। अब आज भी आपसे और आपकी मीडिया के माध्यम से हमें खुशखबरी मिल रही है कि आज सरकार के कान पे जूं आई है कि कैसे भी करके इन गिग वर्कर्स का कुछ करना है, इनके लिए कुछ हेल्प करना है। मैं वेलकम करता हूं सेंट्रल गवर्नमेंट का कि इन्होंने बहुत अच्छा कदम उठाया हमारे गिग वर्कर्स के बारे में। मगर जैसे कि अभी आप पीटीआई आपको स्टेटिंग किया है कि 40% गिग वर्कर्स मोर देन 15,000 के बिलो 15,000 कम पैसा कमा रहे हैं। तो इन सब चीजों को मध्य रखते हुए सरकार सोच के कि इनको क्या मिनिमम वेजेस मिलना चाहिए और लेबर कोड के तहत, तो इसके बारे में भी सरकार को सोच के एक कदम उठाना पड़ेगा। और मैं सरकार का तहे दिल से वेलकम करता हूं कि सेंट्रल गवर्नमेंट ने भी अभी गिग वर्कर्स के बारे में सोचना शुरू कर दिया है।
तो आप बोल रहे हो कि सोचना शुरू कर दिया है, ये एक स्मॉल स्टेप है, स्मॉल विन है आपके लिए, मगर ये तो गवर्नमेंट की तरफ से हुआ, ये आपकी कंपनीज ने कुछ बोला है? आपने इतना आंदोलन किया, प्रोटेस्ट किया, उसके बाद कुछ हुआ भी?
नहीं, कंपनियों के तरफ से तो कुछ नहीं आया। जैसे कि आप लोगों ने देखा था कि हमारे मनसुख मांडवा जी लेबर मिनिस्टर जो हैं, इन्होंने एक स्टेटमेंट दिया था, आपको स्टेटमेंट कोट किया था। इसकी वजह से इन्होंने 10 मिनट्स डिलीवरी का बस ब्रांडिंग हटाया है। अभी भी इनके एप्स में अलग अलग अल्गोरिथम वाला गेम कर रहे हैं, फ्यू मिनट्स। अभी 10 मिनट्स को हटा के चंद फ्यू मिनट्स वाला ये रोल प्ले कर रहे हैं, जिससे अभी भी वर्कर को प्रॉब्लम ही है। कंपनीज को चाहिए कि 10 मिनट्स डिलीवरी वाला जो इन्होंने कहा ये पॉलिसी है, इसको हटा देना चाहिए। इनके ब्रांडिंग ही नहीं बल्कि इनके ऐप से भी हटाना चाहिए।
अच्छा,
जी नबीला।
KV Dhananjay, today with the government acknowledging how important gig workers are, how much we have riding on them, economy, the growth of the economy, and they've projected GDP and its growth, and all thanks to gig economy that seems to be driving this, a driving factor certainly. Now, they've also very clearly stated that they come under the labor code, their basic pay needs to be met. So, as if social security also will be extended to them. What, in your view, does this do to gig workers by and large? According to Inayat, he says this could be just lip service. Not much would probably change on the ground, but still, as a Supreme Court lawyer, would you say that this is really paving the way for them?
Well, this could be a good development, and also this is again a small step. Now, this is only at the stage of a bill. We are yet to see what would become, because not every bill passes, becomes an act in the form. Sometimes amendments happen, sometimes bills are not even considered. So it remains to be seen how the parliament will view this. But we must also note that this ought to have been consultative. When I say consultative, it's important to note that there are just a handful of companies here. And it's important for those companies to feel like they were consulted. Now, that certainly can't happen at the stage of a bill. So much prior to the stage of a bill, if only the government could have employed soft skills and then spoken to these platform owners. I'm saying this because we live in times where, Nabila, you are seeing there is record sellout in the equities market, and foreign funds are withdrawing from different countries, and India too is amongst the top withdrawal for the foreign funds. And we have these unknown and then Mauritius routing foreign funds that are investing in these platform companies. So their investment is not very assured. And it's not as if, I don't think even the government of India would say that investors are lining up to invest in these platform companies, because most of these platform companies don't turn in a profit for 7 or 8 years. And when investment cannot lead to a profit over 7 or 8 years, I can tell you most companies are never going to invest at all. So as we were in fact discussing the same issue last time, the greater nuances this time are that the government certainly can be congratulated for having thought about these issues seriously enough to come out with a bill. But if it's not just enough that we feel placated, gig workers feel placated that the government has now a bill and then it will probably pass a bill and make it into a law. It's important for these investors to feel consulted. I doubt if that has
No, but
happened. And
sir, what I'm saying is, if they've been protesting and they've been, voicing the kind of abuse, subtle abuse that gig workers, according to them, are facing. The unions are claiming they're not a union, they're not allowed to be a union because companies don't allow it. But the groups, the associations who have protested are saying that they're being harassed, in such a way where basic pay is not given. And today the government has acknowledged it, right? So when a government has tabled something like this in the parliament, does it mean now that the owners are liable if they are violating these guidelines?
very true. But the way it works out is the owners might not even realize the kind of liability that they will have to, because if minimum wages are not, part of this bill, but should in minimum wages become part of the package, then we do not know if these investors are going to feel like, oh my God, we've come into this evolving market, we are yet to turn in a, I don't believe any of these platform companies are turning in a profit at this point of time. The problem is that if these funds, most of which are rooted from Mauritius, which already are complaining about a recent judgment of the Honorable Supreme Court in Tiger Global, which went on to say that if you route your funds from Mauritius, you possibly could be violating some of the Indian tax laws and become liable for prosecution and penalties and all of that. Now, if these investment companies, now, by the way, I'm not representing any investment company for your information. I have no connection whatsoever. I was only thinking about the larger good, public good here. We want our gig workers to prosper, but we must also recognize that gig workers have employment solely because you have a few companies that are making extremely economically irrational decisions of creating platforms in the first place. Creating a platform is an extremely irrational economic policy. You're not going to turn in a profit for several years, and most of the time you're going to get burnt out. So if these companies are going to get scared about the evolving regulatory landscape in India, everybody loses. When I say everybody loses, look, if some companies want to say that, look, we are not going to commit to invest more money. We want to wait and see what happens. Scale down. Now, if you're in tier 3 cities, let's take a situation, let's say Zomato. If they are in tier 3 cities, it's entirely possible for some of their investors to say, look, this regulatory landscape is creating uncertainty for us. India is becoming a difficult place to do business in. So let's not invest, let's not expand in those tier 3 cities. Now, who would be the losers? We all will. So it was important in a matter like this that everybody feels consulted. Now, I am all for a bill that will create social security benefits, because none of these companies can reasonably argue and say that there should not be social security benefits. But we are dealing with an extremely sensitive economic sector, and an economic sector that the government too might not be appreciating it for what it is. And that is where we have a problem. And there are some countries of the world that have done this, that sought to regulate and found that these sectors simply vanish. We don't want to be that. And there are so many other countries of the world where regulation is not this fast, and where governments say that, look, let's talk to the platform workers, let's get to know what is happening. And I would have preferred that the bill come a bit later, and what instead would have happened is for our parliamentary committees. Now, does the government of India know what is the extent of workforce in Zomato? I doubt it. But if a parliamentary committee had set out to find out, it could have summoned the owners of Zomato, the owners of Zepto, and then said, look, give us information about how many workers you have. Like, in India, there are so many people watching these US Congress deliberations. US Congress is our parliament equivalent.
Yeah.
So their Congress committees are calling up different companies, different heads of the companies, and then asking them questions, embarrassing them very often. We ought to have done that. We ought to have at least created a public pressure where these companies could have said, if Zomato could say that I am actually making this much of money, and if Zomato had been confronted with, don't you think it's morally imperative for you to also give better wages? Perhaps Zomato then would have applied pressure on their investors and said that, look, we had better do something about it. The problem with laws are they are the easiest to make. I can tell you this: laws are the easiest human activity in this day and age. So making a law is congratulatory here because it gives us a sense of security. But I'm afraid if this law is not going to be what the government wants it to be, but it ends up hurting the sector that it wants to regulate. I think this is something that we have to pay serious attention towards. I'm all for gig workers, and if I have a choice to represent a gig worker group or a platform, I would readily and 100% take the side of a gig worker. As a lawyer, I mean to say, if I were to be professionally engaged, I would want to represent a gig worker. But, in that context, I'm telling you that these are areas of concern.
Right. From what we see here, gig unions there are arguing that incentives offer only short-term relief. So what do you mean by that? Inayat, would you want to tell us what is this, in your view, just a short-term relief?
या देखिए, पे आउट को और मिनिमम वेजेस को एक शॉर्ट टाइम रिलीफ भी है, और भी बहुत सारे चीजें हैं जिसपे सरकार को सोचना चाहिए, जैसे कि एल्गोरिथम है.
उन्होंने बोला है how gig workers are falling prey to these algorithms is what is highlighted today as part of that
Nabila,
survey that was presented.
Algorithm. Perhaps he can explain why he has a problem with algorithm.
बोलिए इनायत जी.
एल्गोरिथम, ये देखिए, एल्गोरिथम डिसाइड करता है कि कौन कितना कमाएगा आज. ये प्रॉब्लम है कि तभी तो आज आपको सर्वे में ये मिल रहा है कि 40% से ज्यादा गिग वर्कर्स 15,000 एक महीना काम करके, जो 12 से 14 घंटे, आपको सर्वे भी है आपके पास, उसमें मैं सर्वे रिपोर्ट भी आपको शेयर कर दूंगा। 12 से 14 घंटे काम करने के बावजूद भी जो है 500 या 500 से कम पैसा कमा रहा है, ये पीटीआई स्टेटिंग कर रही है। तो आप ये एल्गोरिथम से क्या प्रॉब्लम होता है बोलो तो, एल्गोरिथम से बहुत ज्यादा चीट करते हैं ये कंपनीज। उनके पेमेंट, उनके किलोमीटर्स में कुछ आगे पीछे कर देना, जब वो अपने टारगेट पे पहुंचना चाहते हैं, कोई भी वर्कर अपने टारगेट को अचीव करने के लिए, मान के चलिए अगर 12 बुकिंग करने का उनका टारगेट है, अगर वो 10 पे जाता है तो उसको बुकिंग नहीं मिलती। अगर वो लोग उबर का कोई ड्राइवर उसके इंसेंटिव को टारगेट करने के लिए अगर वो एक बुकिंग भी चाहता है, चाहे वो एक साथ 10 गाड़ियां खड़े हो, मगर उसको बुकिंग नहीं मिलेगी, दूसरों को मिलेगी। और भी बहुत सारे चीजें आते हैं कि इसमें एल्गोरिथम है, और आईडी, अनफेयर आईडी ब्लॉकिंग, जिससे कोई कस्टमर कुछ भी उनको रेटिंग दे दे तो फौरन इनका
Let's
आईडी ब्लॉक कर दिया जाता है।
so
मैं
Nabila, now
मैं
dealing with
गवर्नमेंट को
algorithm.
ये चीज पे भी, जी
Now, Nabila, now,
Yeah.
like while dealing with the algorithm, kindly see, uh, certainly these are private employers. They don't believe that all employees are equal, and they will always have an algorithm. And if the government of India were to say that, look, we will make a law to disable all of these algorithms, I'm going to tell you what will happen. They will shut shop, they will just go away, and it's not as if anyone else is going to is available to come and take their place.
Yeah.
Most of these platform companies don't have I mean, like a majority are not Indian investors at all. Algorithms are there because they want to somehow believe that they are identifying efficiency and rewarding efficiency, and then
And they can
disincentivizing
tweak the
inefficiencies.
algorithm as per their whims.
Well, Wim, so now please note, can you make a law to disable algorithms? And kindly imagine what form of law that it
Yeah.
must be. It's nearly impossible.
So when
So
you say, sir, when you say that these companies are not profitable, like Zomato, you're saying that Zepto is not profitable, Blinkit is not profitable.
I don't believe they're profitable at this
So
point of
so
time.
then
They're
would you
expecting
believe? Would you
इसके लिए
believe that?
मैं बोलता हूँ,
हाँ.
they're expecting to become profitable, in the
मैं क्या
future,
बोलता
but
हूँ,
they're not. But they're
एल्गोरिथम के
not
लिए
profitable at
कानून
all.
बनाना।
Nabila, take Amazon. It's unbelievable. Look, if you go back in time for 50 years ago and then ask economists that, do you think there will come a point of time when companies, that too public corporations which are publicly traded, where shareholder pressure is always there to turn in a profit, would be able to invest in companies and then hold and sit tight for 10 or 12 years before they see a profit? I would tell you 50 years ago, economics would have laughed and said that that's simply impossible, because it's only the government sector that can afford to spend money, invest money, and then not want to see a profit, like our Bescoms and then our bus sectors and companies. So private companies, private sectors doing it is so rare, and it continues to be rare. I don't believe these companies are profitable at this
So do
point
you
of time.
believe that with the government now agreeing that the gig workers are a backbone to our growing economy, some allotment might come this budget, the upcoming budget session, there could be something that could be allotted to these companies so that they could pass on the benefits to these gig workers? It doesn't happen like that?
There is no such money to spare. We are
Okay.
spending more than 30% of our money towards payment of interest. I mean, the
So
central government.
then the companies are going to bleed. If they are bleeding, they will not. They wouldn't care less. Couldn't care less of what the gig workers are going through.
Yeah, yes, but again, unlike other sectors, the reason why we want to worry here is because these investors are finicky, and it's important to recognize that. I don't believe the central government can come out and assure and say that we are confident of these laws and we believe no one is going to go away. I can assure you, nobody in the central government is going to publicly make a statement to that effect, that despite these bills becoming acts in place, none of the current platforms are going to, investors are going to withdraw. That's just not going to be the statement of the government at all.
Okay.
And that is why we've got to be very sensitive. We've got to walk a nice balancing stick. And our gig workers also should be slightly reasonable in terms of, look, is it possible that there are also problems with our gig workers? Now, are we doing enough to address it? Now, if we say we have a problem with algorithms are how big businesses are run these days.
Yeah.
In fact, our airline tickets, by the way, if I want to travel between Bangalore and Delhi and I want to book now, and I don't book now, but then I want to book 3 hours later, you know what happens? Fares will change. Now, what's making those fares change? It's an algorithm. That's a part and parcel of how big businesses work now. Now, if the government wants to attack that because gig
So
workers have a
that's where
problem with
basic pay, social security, all of those aspects come
basic pay
into
is
play.
great. Basic pay is great. Social security is great. But the bill, at the end of the day, ought not to attack algorithms or say that they want to know how these algorithms are created or how they are administered. Because if you want to be that intrusive, I can assure you that a lot of these companies might want to simply shut shop because it's so much safer, isn't it? The world is not so very, very stable these days.
तो
You're seeing what's happening.
लास्ट क्वेश्चन सर टू इनायत. इनायत, तो फिर ऐसा अगर है तो वो प्रॉफिटेबल नहीं है और अब गवर्नमेंट ने बोल दिया है कि सेफगार्ड्स रहना चाहिए. अब आप कैसे मैनेज करोगे? आपका क्या अगला कदम है?
नबीला जी, मैं वकील साहब की बात पे एक बात कहना चाहता हूँ. एल्गोरिथम के वकील साहब ने कहा कि इसको तो हम कानून नहीं बना सकते. दैट इज बी इम्पॉसिबल. मैं इस बात को मानता हूँ, मगर आप लोगों को समझना चाहिए कि एल्गोरिथम से वर्कर्स पे कितना मेंटली प्रेशर हो रहा है. वो हर घंटे एक उम्मीद में रहता है कि मैं आज कुछ कमाऊंगा, मैं अपने टारगेट को रीच करके कुछ इंसेंटिव्स में घर पे लेके जाऊंगा.
वो जैसे बोल रहे हैं एल्गोरिथम्स ऐसी चीज है कि हम कोई कुछ भी नहीं कर पा रहा है ना. ऐसा चीज है कि वो गवर्नमेंट कैसे
सरकार पे मैं एक मिनट मैम, मैं इसीलिए बोल रहा हूँ कि सरकार को सोचना चाहिए कि मिनिमम वेजेस, अगर वर्कर आपके लिए, आपके कंपनी के लिए 10 घंटे या 12 घंटा काम करता है तो उसके लिए एक मिनिमम वेजेस तय किया जाए. जैसे कि स्विगी, जोमेटो, अमेजन, ओला, उबर के सारे वर्कर्स जो है उनका एक डिवाइस होता है जिसमें लॉग इन आवर्स होता है. जब वो कमिट होके आपके लिए लॉग इन करके 10-10, 12-12 घंटे काम करता है तो उसके हर एक घंटे की कोई कीमत लगाई जाए ताकि वो सैटिस्फाइड बैठे रहेगा, उसके लिए मेंटली प्रेशर नहीं होगा.
Basically, that's where the basic pay and a right amount, suitable amount to honor the hard work of these gig workers should be implemented by these companies itself. So we'll see where this takes us. The government has tabled this today as part of the survey, acknowledged that there's a problem, has said gig workers are important. So how do they wade through this? How, moving forward, what kind of a law or a bill that they would announce or implement is something we've got to wait and watch. But the discussion has happened. And people like Inayat Ali are to be thanked.
The Association should set up a website and then should communicate with people and then should also receive complaints about what might be happening.
Make it more, formalize it, yes.
Yes, and it's important.
Yes. Inayat ji, thank you very much, and KV Dhananjay for joining us. We'll continue tracking your story.
Thank you.
Thank you.